There are 12 different MiG-21s in War Thunder, and out of all of them, I think that the MiG-21S, is probably the most controversial. Some people think it's great, and others think it's absolutely terrible. And even I myself, well, truth be told, I have a love-hate relationship with this aircraft. To get you up to speed, the MiG-21S is a rank 6 premium that sits in the Soviet tech tree at a battle rating of 9.7. And what's interesting is that unlike most other rank 6 and 7 premiums, this is not a pack premium, which means that you can't buy it on the Gaijin store, and instead you have to buy it in-game for about 9,000 Golden Eagles. Is it worth it? Well, let's go find out. Oh, well, luckily, getting more Golden Eagles is something we can do with today's video sponsor, Free Golden Eagles for War Thunder. By simply downloading the app through the first link in the description, you too can earn free Golden Eagles by completing simple tasks. For example, playing a new game or filling out a survey. If you download the app, make sure to use my invitation code MDK9K to receive 10 extra Golden Eagles to help you get started. And with that, back to the video. Like I said, the MiG-21S will set you back almost 9,000 Golden Eagles. And truth be told, I don't think this jet is worth that price tag, but it's not for the reasons that you might expect, because I actually don't think this is a bad plane at all. I think it's no secret that I absolutely adore the MiG-21 SMT as well as the 21MF, and that's primarily because these aircraft have absolutely amazing flight performance. Not only are they very agile, but they also have a thrust-to-weight ratio of Lamau, and as a result, these jets can go toe-to-toe with basically anything at their own battle rating. What does that have to do with the MiG-21S? Well, here's the thing. The MiG-21S and the MiG-21MF are the same plane, at least in the sense that they have the exact same airframe and the exact same engine. In other words, this 9.7 jet has flight performance that is equal to that of aircraft of a higher battle rating. And as you can probably imagine, that makes the MiG-21S an absolute powerhouse of a dogfighter at 9.7. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the MiG-21S can slam dunk any aircraft it comes across even in a full up tier. However, what I will say is that the MiG-21S has essentially got the perfect flight performance for its battle rating. Even in a full down tier, there are plenty of other aircraft that are very agile and very maneuverable. In fact, something like the Sabre can sit behind the MiG-21S any day of the week as long as you're both going slow enough. However, what sets the MiG-21S apart is that it has an absolutely hilarious amount of engine power. Under optimal conditions, this thing has a thrust-to-weight ratio greater than 1. But more importantly, even at slower speeds, the amount of thrust coming out of this engine is absolutely bonkers, which means that the MiG-21S accelerates extremely quickly even from a full standstill. Whenever you realize that you're losing a dogfight against a much slower but more maneuverable aircraft like, for example, a Sabre, then all you need to do is simply point your nose in a straight line, and within seconds you'll be traveling at speeds that Sabre can't even reach in a dive. This ability to just simply disengage whenever you want is one of the main things that makes the MiG-21S very enjoyable to fly. However, there is one more piece to the puzzle. Just like every other MiG-21 in the game, the MiG-21S suffers from a syndrome called horrible energy retention, which can be a very bad thing because it means that it's fairly easy for the MiG-21S to become energy trapped. But on the other hand, this bad energy retention can also be a very powerful tool, especially in a down tier. Like I already mentioned, it is very common for the MiG-21S to go up against aircraft that are much slower than itself, which means that in theory, you run the constant risk of overshooting an opponent as soon as you try to get under 6. However, because you have that terrible energy retention, all you need to do is just maneuver a couple of times as you're getting in position behind the enemy, and by the time you're under 6, you'll be going at roughly the same speed, which means that you can get off a couple of shots, try to shoot down the enemy, and like I said, worst case scenario, you realize that you're starting to lose the dogfight, and in that case you can just run away. And that essentially gives the MiG-21S the ability to dictate a lot of engagements. You're the one who decides when you want to start the fight, and you're the one who decides when you want to stop the fight. And that's something that's not only fun because it gives you a lot of control as a player, but it's also fun because it allows you to make quite a few mistakes. When you mess up, you just run away, come back later and try again. Do keep in mind, however, that this is really only true when you're playing this jet at its own battle rating or in a down tier. When you get up there to 10.3 or 10.7, you'll start running into fighters which can very easily either keep up with you or outright beat you in a dogfight. There are still plenty of engagement you can win in the MiG-21S, even in a full up tier, but then you're really more relying on the context of ARB saving your ass by either forcing the enemy into a bad position, or because the enemy makes a couple of mistakes which you can take advantage of. TLDR, although the MiG-21S certainly isn't perfect nor overpowered, it is a very powerful dogfighter given its flight performance, especially when compared to jets at 9.7 or below. This is a good plane, or at least that could be your conclusion based on what I've said in this video so far. In reality though, I think it's a lot more complicated than that. This plane has attributes about it which are very good, but it's also extremely lacking in other areas which I've so far yet to talk about. Because, well, at the end of the day, this is a 9.7 jet that has flight performance equal to aircraft that you find at 10.3, which begs the question, why is this jet at 9.7 in the first place? Well, it's not because it lacks good missiles. Sure, it doesn't get the R60s, which you find on something like the MiG-21 SMT or the MF, but the R3R and the R3S are still perfectly good enough for this battle rating. The real issue with the MiG-21S is the complete lack of countermeasures. Not having flares in the 9.7 matchmaker is really frustrating. Just to be clear, you don't necessarily have to be dying to enemy missiles every single match. However, in order for that to be the case, you do need to play this jet very methodically and you need to be very careful about your positioning. In other words, just the presence of these missiles alone is enough to force you to play this jet in a very particular way. You need to try to stay as fast as possible and only engage targets of opportunity. Unless you're super certain that you're not going to get third-partied by an enemy player, it is near impossible to utilize this aircraft's amazing flight performance. The second you slow down to start a dogfight, you'll find yourself becoming an extremely easy target for an enemy missile. Another major annoyance that is caused by the MiG-21S not having flares is the fact that this aircraft is extremely unforgiving. Even if you only make a tiny mistake in your positioning, that alone can already be enough to get you killed. And the reason I bring this up is because, especially if you're a newer player, this is very important to keep in mind. If you do not yet have perfect positioning skills in ARB and you don't know exactly which aircraft you can find in the 9.7 matchmaker, then you're gonna have a hard time playing this jet. And with that said, there is one more thing to keep in mind. Like I already mentioned earlier, this jet primarily gets its kills from focusing on targets of opportunity, which means that how good you do in a match has a lot more to do with luck than most people would probably like to admit. For most of your kills, you'll be relying either on your teammates forcing the enemy players into a bad position, which you can then take advantage of, or you're relying on enemies being extremely clueless and unaware, which allows you to sneak up on them. So yes, you can certainly do well in this jet, just keep in mind that a lot of that doesn't necessarily come down to what this aircraft is and isn't capable of. And just to be clear, every single problem with the MiG-21S not having flares isn't a problem that's exclusive to this jet. Virtually every other 9.7 or 9.3 aircraft that doesn't have countermeasures suffers from the exact same problems. And honestly, compared to such other aircraft, I still think that the MiG-21S does a remarkably good job at being fun despite not having countermeasures. There will definitely be moments that you want to pull your hair out whilst playing this jet, but honestly, most of the matches I played in this aircraft I found enjoyable. And therefore, it might be strange when I once again reiterate that I don't think this jet is worth buying. I want to make it clear that I'm not saying this because I think this is a bad plane, but rather I'm saying it because I just don't think this is a good premium, especially not when you consider there are many other great options for premium aircraft in the Soviet tech tree. Sure, the MiG-23ML and the Su-25K will both cost a bit more than the MiG-21S, but for your money, I think you'll be getting an aircraft that is a lot better at grinding. And even if you are dead set on not spending more than $50, I still don't think the MiG-21S is the best value for money. Instead, what I recommend you do is you buy the Su-11 and then later on just talisman the MiG-21 SMT. That way, instead of ending up with just a single plane that's somewhat decent at grinding, you'll have two planes which are absolutely awesome to use to grind through almost the entire Soviet tech tree. Anyway, with all of that said, I want to move on to the second part of this video. So far, I've essentially given you just a plain review of what this jet is/isn't, but I haven't really shown you what this jet actually plays like in a match. And that's precisely what I want to do in the second part of the video. I want to show you some gameplay and then basically explain to you what decisions I'm making and how I'm going about about playing this aircraft. But before I do that, I do quickly have one request. According to YouTube, only about 9% of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So in case you're one of the 91% of people who aren't subscribed yet, please consider clicking that button and joining my channel. The gameplay you're seeing in the background is me playing the MiG-21S in a 9-0 to 10-0 game. And the reason I'm showing you this match specifically is because I think it highlights what it's like to play the MiG-21S extremely well. The first thing I'm doing is simply climbing the space. The match just started, which means that all the enemies are also doing the same, and that gives me the opportunity to get some free kills. I've already mentioned that this plane gets the R3R and the R3S. The latter really isn't all that interesting because it's just a 10G rear aspect IR missile with a caged seeker. The R3R though, well, that's a whole nother beast. Sure, on paper, the R3S and the R3R are identical in terms of their kinematics. They both only have 10 Gs of overload, they're equally as fast, and have the same amount of range. The major difference is that the R3R is radar guided, which allows you to get all aspect shots like that. And sure, the ability to launch the R3R in front aspect is really nice, but it's not the main reason why I prefer the R3R over the R3S. The problem with the R3S is that, like I said, it has a caged seeker, which means you have to look directly at the enemy plane in order to launch your missile, which is a problem because that means it's impossible to lead this missile towards where the enemy is actually going, and therefore it's relatively hard for the R3S to hit an enemy unless you launch it from directly behind them. The R doesn't have this problem at all. As long as you've got a radar lock, you can launch your missile regardless of where the enemy is in relation to the nose of your aircraft, which is useful for two reasons. Like you can see here, I don't need to commit to this head-on in order to still get the kill. I can kind of just roll around, make sure I'm not really an easy target for his guns, and just like that I've blasted an R3R straight into its cockpit. But another reason that's very useful is because it actually allows you to effectively lead the R3R, making it a lot more effective to launch this missile even when you're not shooting at the enemy from directly the front or directly behind. Anyway, that's enough of me rambling about this jet's missiles. Now let's look a bit more in detail at the following gameplay. So far, I've just gotten 2 easy kills by simply going head on and slamming the enemy out of the sky with my missile, but now I'm actually going to be dogfighting some people and using my guns. And I think that from this gameplay, it'll become clear why I say that most of the people you kill in this jet are targets of opportunity. As you can see, I'm diving towards a big group of enemies, and for one reason or another, every single one of these enemies appears to be going very slow, and that of course means that they're all relatively easy targets. After analyzing the situation for a bit, I realized that this Saber on the right is going to be the easiest kill, because he goes upwards, stalls himself out, and essentially parks himself right in front of my guns. As you can see, I crit him, set him on fire, and that's going to be kill number 3 in just a moment. Point my nose back down, start diving after the F4C, and that will be my next target. Honestly, the F4C isn't necessarily a very scary jet whilst flying the MiG-21S, but the main reason I want to focus on him is because I don't want him to run away from me at the end of the game. Although it may not be the fastest jet, it would still be very... well, I guess never mind. Look behind me and I see a Hunter as well as a Saber coming in, and as you can see, they're very much tunnel visioned on my friendly Su-25. And I think this is another great example of me going for targets of opportunity. The Saber, he's smart enough to extend away the second he sees me. However, this same can't be said about this Hunter. He just stays behind the Su-25, which means all I have to do is line up my guns, and boom goes the dynamite. Then I look at the Milan, he's far enough away from us to not worry about him, which means I can now just freely go and dogfight this last remaining Saber. But then suddenly Code Brown, because in the kill feed you'll see an A-10 killing a ground target. So I look behind me, and to my shock he's right there within 5 kilometers, which means that if he was just a little bit closer, I would probably have caught an AIM-9L right then and there. But luckily for me that isn't the case, and instead I have the opportunity to accelerate away and gain some altitude, basically putting some distance between us. Not only does that make sure I don't get missiled, but it also gives me the ability to quickly regain my thoughts and see how I want to approach this situation. Like I said, I wanted to go and dogfight that Saber, but because he's currently too close to the enemy A-10, that's no longer possible. So instead, I decided to change my plan and I start going for this Lightning F6, who just became unspotted below me. But then, as I'm diving down, the enemy A-10 is killed by one of my teammates, which is a huge win for me, because now I'm no longer constricted in where I can go on the map. So I decide to refocus my attention on the enemy Saber to make sure he doesn't end up clapping my teammates' cheeks. And I guess the enemy enemy lightning must have had a similar idea, because he's now shifted his attention onto my friendly. And again, because I don't want my friendly to die, I now decide to shift my focus back to the enemy lightning, and in doing so, I force him to break off his attack and turn into me. Then for a split second, I seemingly forget he exists, and then just in time I turn into him to make sure he doesn't get behind me. And due to these rapid maneuvers, I've now lost basically all of my energy, so that lightning is now going to start extending away from us. And that gives me the opportunity to once again focus on the enemy saber. So I whip my nose around and then launch an R3S at him. But then a second later, I realize he's going extremely slowly, which likely means his engine was taken out by one of my teammates. And although I won't end up getting the kill, I do think this once again is a great showcase for the fact that you're relying a lot on the people around you to create targets of opportunity for you. I didn't win a dogfight against that saber, and instead I just was in the right place at the right time. As you can see, I'm currently chasing down the enemy lightning, who at this point is the last remaining enemy. And luckily for me, I get the chance to shoot him right here, right now. Except, unluckily for me, it doesn't really do any damage. I did get a crit, but what I crit the game doesn't tell me, which likely means it was just some part of his airframe, and based on how he's flying, it's very likely not an important part at all. Shoot an R3S at him in the hopes that it forces him to turn, which would make him slow down, but as you can see, my missile gets nowhere near him, which means that the only thing left for me to do is to simply keep accelerating and try to catch up to him, which isn't necessarily a big challenge for the MiG-21S, as this plane is a lot faster than the Lightning, and more importantly, there are also a couple of teammates around who will help force the enemy to turn, which then allows me to fairly easily get back on their 6. Honestly, this cat and mouse game really isn't that interesting to commentate, so instead I quickly want to talk about this plane's matchmaking, which is a topic I've avoided so far in this video, because quite frankly, this aircraft's matchmaking is remarkably unremarkable. In other words, it's very neutral. Yes, you get down tiers, but you see equally as many up tiers, and most of the time you'll just be fighting planes just around your own battle rating, either being 9-3 or 10-0. Anyway, with that, we've now arrived at the final shot of the video. There you go, rip off the Lightning's wings, and just like that, I've gotten myself 5 kills and 1 assist. And with the match coming to a close, I think it's also time that I start to conclude this video. Like I said, the MiG-21S is an honestly quite amazing plane, and I really had a great time playing this jet in most of the matches that I played. However, because it doesn't get flares, it can be extremely annoying and painful to play, and most importantly, because there are other much more consistent grinders out there, I don't think this is necessarily a good premium to purchase at all. Thank you very much for watching, remember to subscribe, join my Discord server, and well, goodbye.